Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma. I am flying solo here ahead of Super Bowl Sunday, but just behind the NFL honors, which aired on Thursday night. And yeah, that's why I'm here. Of course, if you missed our episode earlier this week, we're kind of doing, we're in this off season, even though the NFL season, we still got the one big game, an annoying thing all of itself that nobody could use a trademarked name Super Bowl to promote the Super Bowl unless they're paying the big bucks to advertise up to $7 million for a 30-second spot. So I hear. So there's been a lot of news just since Monday, since I was on with Zach Flash Celadonia, and we'll probably be on again at some point next week. We had the NFL honors that dropped. We have the Hall of Fame class that was announced, which I don't have a whole lot. I could probably just jump into the Hall of Fame class real quick. I don't have a whole lot to say about the Hall of Fame class other than Reggie Wayne, formerly of the Indianapolis Colts. Great wide receiver, don't get me wrong. But if Reggie Wayne gets his foot in the door in Canton and gets one of those busts, Hines Ward has to be a shoe-in to make it. So I've been monitoring specifically Reggie Wayne's trajectory when it comes to Hall of Fame honors, accolades, awards, etc. for quite some time. Everyone else that got into that class, I know there was some snubs there, like Antonio Gates, for example. Tight ends just don't get love like a lot of other positions, and there's already chatter about the large class that's coming in next year and where some of these guys fit in, where they're going to have to wait, et cetera, et cetera. But Dwight Freeney, Julius Peppers, Audrey Johnson, I believe the first Texan, Houston Texan, that will be, well, they really don't go in as a player. This isn't like other sports, but you get the sentiment. It's the first player that's played for the Houston Texans to get in to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So congratulations to all of those guys. There's some other Steelers news, some new hires to the coaching staff that I will also cover. And then I'm going to jump into this NFL honors. And of course, the headline here with TJ Watt being snubbed for Defensive Player of the Year. And I've got a lot to say about that, but let me jump in real quick with the Pittsburgh Steelers and quite a bit of news that's coming over from that direction. So, reported just on the same day, I believe, yes, on Thursday. The Pittsburgh Steelers expected, not formally announced just yet, kind of holding off, just like when we were talking about Arthur Smith becoming the offensive coordinator, but the Steelers are adding some extra oomph in their passing game. This is a passing game position, passing game coordinator. Tom Arth, formerly an assistant with Brandon Staley over with the Los Angeles Chargers, former quarterback that was a backup to Peyton Manning and a head coach in the college ranks. He's going to come in and work with the Steelers. They've not had a passing game coordinator, I don't think, ever. And somebody could correct me if I'm wrong, but not ever. I mean, this is a team that went without a quarterbacks coach in 2019 entirely, just rolling with just an offensive coordinator, and Randy Fichtner being promoted from that spot. So Tom Arth, an interesting hire, just like, with Arthur Smith, the Steelers, they're getting experienced guys, but Tom Arth, same age as me. I'm 42, by the way. I don't have to hide it out there. I know some people get sensitive, ageist, whatever. Brian's older than me. Zach's younger than me. So I've had the pleasure, at least, for most of my lifetime, the Steelers have not had a losing season, but I've had the pleasure at least grow up at the kickoff of the Bill Cowher era back there in 92 as a youth and grow up with that. I did miss the 70s, but Brian caught that. And then, of course, Zach. So we almost have like three generations, just like with the Steelers, three head coaches when it comes to our main hosts here at the Steel City Underground podcast. By the way, if this is your first time tuning in, welcome. I hope you enjoy. Oh, I don't like to be a broken record too much on the same topic. So when I was with Zach last week, there were certain topics, I should say, on Monday, certain stats, certain things that I just wanted his opinion because I had already spoke on those. So I know some people dropped in the comments, they're like, oh, well, you didn't mention this or you didn't mention this. It's like, it could be a 2-hour long show. I don't know, nobody got time for that. So I appreciate you wherever yinz are watching, listening. Thank you for tuning in. And by all means, go back in some of our archives, some of our shows. There's a lot of information out there that is not dated. So age-wise, the Steelers aren't going for guys that are just 60, 70 years old. Arthur Smith himself, 41 years of age. You've got Tom Arth here. He's been around the league. He was a player with the Indianapolis Colts. He actually played in NFL Europe, in Europa, and also with the Green Bay Packers, practice squad, blah, 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 in arena leagues. And it's kind of interesting. He's a Cleveland guy. So he's got his feet wet in the coaching ranks with John Carroll, a Division III school up in the Cleveland suburbs. If some of you that are familiar that have to deal with the Northeast Ohio stuff, having grown up in Youngstown, Ohio, born and raised myself, I have a lot of familiarity with that area, and there's always that, clashing between, I got the sign back here, you can't really see it on either view, but it's the house divided, Browns and Steelers, and I'm going to have a lot to say about that when we get to the NFL honors. Head coach for John Carroll for several years, moved up to Chattanooga, University of Akron, back into Northeast Ohio, became the passing game specialist the last 2 years with the Los Angeles Chargers. Depending on where you're looking or hearing this news, some people are saying that he's going to be the quarterback's coach. There are some folks out there that are claiming that he will be that he's hired as the passing game coordinator. Mike Sullivan being reported also by Aaron Wilson over who's Aaron working for these days? Previously worked for Houston Chronicle, Baltimore Sun. So he covers the NFL in general. Pretty reputable account, I would say. But he's also reported that Mike Sullivan is going to be retained on the Pittsburgh Steelers staff. And he's also reporting that they're going to keep him in the role of quarterback's coach after contemplating shifting job responsibilities. He had a shift in responsibilities, as many of you already know, working with Eddie Faulkner as kind of tandem to replace Matt Canada at the offensive coordinator position. Mike Sullivan has been an offensive coordinator in the NFL and otherwise over the years. So this is, again, I said Mike Tomlin would probably have been like, burnt at the stake like a witch if he would have made an internal hire with Mike Sullivan. But I like Mike Sullivan, and Mike Sullivan has been getting some sniffs around the league as well for open positions at the offensive coordinator position. But keeping him around, I think, it's just a boon for this coaching staff. Adding Arthur Smith, who's a former head coach, and now Tom Arth. And Tom Arth isn't the only hire, but Tom Arth also only 42 years of age, same age as me. It's kind of humbling. The guy's been in football at a pro or at least collegiate level at some level over the last 20 years and gotten to work with a variety of different coaches and players. You look at some of the staffs and stuff that some of these guys are on, it's kind of interesting how there is this crossover, this whole it's a small world kind of deal. Zach Azzini is also the other hire that the Pittsburgh Steelers made after we were talking on Monday, where we're looking at the coaching staff chart with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And right at the end of the show, we found out that Frisman Jackson was being let go as the wide receivers coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. They've already made a move. Jerry Dulac over from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette reporting Azzini was with the New York Jets last year as an assistant. He also reported that the former Chargers assistant Tom Arth coming in, but he's saying as quarterback coach, they're still in discussion for some arrangement with former quarterback coach Mike Sullivan. So, this is getting hammered out. There's not official press releases for the additional hires or, excuse me, still dealing with it, folks. I'm sorry. I apologize. Still no official press release for any of this at this time, but expect these announcements here in the near future, and then we'll get official word on where everyone's going to be situated. Azzini himself, if you take a look at his history, he's under 50 years of age as well, age 47. He's been around mostly college football, although he entered the pro ranks in 2017 with the Chicago Bears previously for the previous 16, 17 years, bouncing around all over college football, namely Division I programs as in various offensive roles, namely as wide receivers coach, also offensive coordinator, passing game coordinator with different programs in the pros, though, working with wide receivers exclusively, 2017 with the Chicago Bears. No one of note to really mention there, and if you know anything about 2017 Chicago Bears, that is a young Mitchell Trubisky coming in for his rookie season in the National Football League, so not a surprise there. Had a longer stint with the Denver Broncos between 2018 and 2022, where the quarterbacks... Man, the quarterback's just so bad that he's dealt with, and the wide receivers still some production. He got 1,000-yard season out of Cam Sutton, or I'm sorry, Cortland Sutton. Brain fart. Cam Sutton, of course, formerly of the Steelers, a cornerback. Wide receivers is the name of the game here. And Cortland Sutton, 1,000-yard, actually 1,100 yards plus season back in 2019. Some of the other notable names he's worked with: Emmanuel Sanders, Demaryius Thomas, Tim Patrick, Jerry Jeudy. So he's capable of coaching up these young men at the wide receiver position, despite having quarterback play such as Joe Flacco. That's a name we'll hear again shortly. Drew Lock, Brandon Allen. I believe Trevor Simeon's kind of in here somewhere as well. Case Keenum is. And who else? Jeff Driscoll, Brett Ripien. Oh, man, the COVID season. Kendall Hinton, when all three quarterbacks were sent to the sideline for violating COVID protocol and really left the Broncos out to dry. I mean, that was terrible. Also, Teddy Bridgewater in that conversation as well. So it's an interesting tenure. It's also, just talking about that makes you kind of freak out as a Steelers fan if they don't get this quarterback thing right. How many more times can you just keep recycling and moving along and yada, yada, yada? It ends up being tough. So, and he also worked with Russell Wilson for a year. Russell's first year, the Nathaniel Hackett season, he's not so great over with the Denver Broncos. So I know that doesn't sound like the most promising thing, but you can't hang a full record for one position coach like on him with the rest of that team that's there. It's just to show the receivers that were there are all tremendous receivers, and let's see what Azzini's capable of doing here. It definitely needed a change, a fresh face here after with the Matt Canada go route, like no variety, no nothing. And we're also seeing some guys that seem like they kind of quit on routes, etc. Steelers have had since the passing of Daryl Drake. I know they had Ray Sherman in there as an interim kind of coach helping out with receivers. He was there during training camp just to kind of, I don't know, the old guys that come around, they're giving back to the game. They've made a lot of money. They like to be around the atmosphere, but maybe not want to do this, 80 to 100 hours a week grind that is being a coach in the National Football League. But since that, the Steelers were a wide receiver factory, and they still have an eye, at least for scouting wide receiver talent. But I think we could all agree it could be a level better. We see the greatness that could come from George Pickens and even Deontay Johnson, for that matter. Don't laugh. Calvin Austin, Speedy. So I like bringing in a new face, young face, somebody that's going to hopefully put this whole wide receivers group over the top. Now, let's get to the NFL honors. Maybe I should start with the positives first, and maybe not the negatives. This is really tough for me. I'm going to wait. Hold it, Joe. Just, I know it seems like I'm maybe not as mad as I really am. I was seething yesterday, and I knew this crap was going to happen. I'm going to try not to cuss while I'm on the show. Let's talk about some of the awards. AP Most Valuable Player, presented by Invisalign. Everything's presented by somebody, right? Lamar Jackson, Baltimore Ravens. I don't think there was any question that Lamar Jackson was going to get this award. Comes back 2 seasons where he didn't finish due to injury. I do have my questions, though. It's not Lamar's best or even second best year as far as throwing the football and touchdown-wise. Limited most of his turnovers. 24 touchdowns. Wins an MVP award. Not even 4,000 yards passing. 36-78. Somewhere, they're not in a grave yet, but they'd be rolling in it if they were. Guys like Steve Young, Joe Montana. I might be blowing smoke with Montana, but you get it. The gunslingers, Warren Moon. I mean, just recently, Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, MVP. Aaron Rodgers, when he was on his game, not getting 4,000 yards. Dan Marino's of the world. I mean, Lamar Jackson, obviously brings a lot of other stuff to the table, right? Running the football, he had 821 yards, 5 touchdowns. But that's not even his best season doing that. He's went over 1,000 yards twice. The second and third years in the league. He played an additional game. So it's kind of interesting that I was kind of wondering with some of the numbers, I'm like, could somebody like Dak Prescott have been named? And mind you, these awards get voted for before the when the regular season's concluding. So playoffs are not a consideration here. If you want to call them a flop in the playoffs, I'll have similar comments to make about some other players. Dak Prescott threw 36 touchdowns and 4,516 yards and only 9 interceptions. Completed almost 70% of his passes and led the Cowboys to a 12-5 record. 36 touchdowns. Now, we're talking about Lamar. He ran for 5 touchdowns, threw for 24. It counted for just 29 total touchdowns. Dak ran the ball some too, 242 yards. I know it's not 8-something, not leading the team in rushing as Lamar Jackson did, and just 2 touchdowns on the ground. But that was just one case in point. Dak Prescott, I thought, was a pretty healthy contender for this crown. Alas, I'm not arguing that Lamar Jackson doesn't deserve it. Lamar, very much so a dynamic player. Still not somebody I thought was a fit for the Steelers, as much as people want to say. He would have sat the bench for several years and may not even still been on the roster with aging Ben Roethlisberger, who the Steelers stuck with. That's a conversation for a whole nother day. I don't like that people say the teams passed. They didn't want to trade. They went after Deshaun Watson, of course. Low-hanging fruit. They knew Deshaun Watson was available. They were going to be able to get Deshaun Watson for whatever. And then Cleveland goes, and they had to make this really high over-the-top bid where you're at auction, and nobody else is like, that's crazy. Go ahead. You can take it. Well, Lamar was the guy that had 2 serious injuries they had to come back from, and is very much so known more for running. When you have a knee injury and you got to come back and you're demanding like max contract, I know that's not like a real thing, but you get what I'm saying. Max contract, guys that are making 40 to 50 mil average per year now at the quarterback position and more. We're going north of that now. Dak set that off initially. So, yeah, Jackson, I don't have the biggest problem with him. I think most people just think I'm blowing smoke because I'm a Steelers fan, and that's true. I don't like the Ravens, but I'll give Lamar his flowers. Offensive Player of the Year, Christian McCaffrey. How can you not? This guy scored touchdowns in how many straight games? He's pretty much the missing link that the 49ers needed for that offense. It's really tough, too. He had a pretty big contract, a second contract with the Panthers. Guy that's been injured off and on. That's pretty good bounce back for him. I'm skipping over some of these. It just says Cleveland Browns, Cleveland Browns, Cleveland Browns. I'll give roses to one of these Cleveland Browns guys that won an award, but that'll be in a minute. The rest of them, I gotta take some issue. Rookie of the Year, C.J. Stroud. And Offensive Rookie of the Year. Defensive Rookie of the Year, Will Anderson. Top picks in the draft. Both Houston Texans. Who could deny that? These guys had phenomenal years. You got some other awards that were given out, aside from the Associated Press Awards, the NFL awards themselves. And, there's the Art Rooney Sportsmanship Award. Went to Bobby Wagner of the Seattle Seahawks. They have like fan of the year, flag players of the year, next gen moment of the year, FedEx air and ground players, Bud Light easy to celebrate moment of the year, Tommy DeVito. I guess big New York City market, and this guy, basically living at home. Hometown guy. He's got the Italian name that fits in with that kind of, just the setting, the culture of New York City there. It's what you think of, right? I think it works. I think that one's fun. I thought, you got Brock Purdy as the air, FedEx air, and Christian McCaffrey, FedEx ground. They paired them together. That works. McCaffrey also won the Jim Brown Award for the top running back in the National Football League. Deacon Jones Sack Leader Award goes to Oh, wait a minute. No, it doesn't go to Myles Garrett. He didn't lead the league in sacks. It went to TJ Watt. TJ Watt of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Ruh-roh. Oh, I'm going to start getting on my soapbox, but I do have to give due to some of the other Steelers that won some awards. DJ did not attend this, what do you want to say, dog and pony show, this farce of awards. It is nice to see Cameron Hayward get the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. He's been up for it about 5 or 6 times, and long overdue, in my opinion. Very nice to see Najee Harris get the Angry Run of the Year award, even though he's not going to take a photo with the Harry Potter stick, the scepter that Kyle Brandt gives out. That's a lot of fun, too. But Defensive Player of the Year, it's rough. TJ Watt, though, Deacon Jones Award, 19 sacks. That means he had 19. His runner-ups would have been Josh Allen of the Jacksonville Jaguars, not to be confused with another Josh Allen, who was tied second with Trey Hendrickson of the Cincinnati Bengals, who had a fantastic year, in my opinion. Probably should have been in that Defensive Player of the Year conversation. It was very quiet for Trey Hendrickson. What a pickup by the Bengals. If anything, I know Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase turned that franchise around. Trey Hendrickson definitely needs to get some credit. Excuse me. 17.5 sacks. He's had, in his time in Cincinnati, he's had almost 40 sacks in 46 starts. 25 quarterback hits, 16 tackles for loss. He had 3 forced fumbles. You'd almost think those are MVP type numbers. I'm not even talking about TJ Watt. This is Trey Hendrickson, another AFC North team. AFC North cleaned house on these awards, by the way. They were everywhere. So Trey Hendrickson was second in the league in sacks. Khalil Mack, a little resurgence there with the Chargers, had 17. Danielle Hunter, 16.5. Those are your top 5. A lot of people are talking about these two guys as defensive players of the year. Max Crosby and Micah Parsons of the Raiders and the Cowboys. 14.5 and also 14 sacks, respectively. Max Crosby's been getting it done. 90 tackles, 23 tackles for loss, 31 quarterback hits, 2 forced fumbles. That's those are some really healthy numbers. I'm already talking about Trey Hendrickson and propping up Trey Hendrickson. Max Crosby going nuts. I do believe Max Crosby. We had an interview with Max Crosby, Eric Herman, who used to be a contributor here long ago, one of the OGs here at Steel City Underground. Got him way back in 2019. Had him in his mock draft too. Became like a favorite. And it was like, imagine if the Steelers would have landed him. That would have been something. 2019 NFL draft. 4th round, 106 overall. Whew. Not quite like 12th overall. Micah Parsons. You knew Micah Parsons was going to be a dude. You just didn't know he was going to be the edge rusher dude that he is. He's got 40.5 sacks in 50 games in 3 years in the NFL. 33 quarterback hits, 18 tackles for loss. I already mentioned the 14 sacks. He had a forced fumble. A force. He gets 3rd place in his Defensive Player of the Year award voting, by the way. There's a guy I haven't named yet. He's next on this list. Myles Garrett with 14 sacks, tied with Micah Parsons. And then falling out the top 10, Justin Madubuike, 13. Montez Sweat, who's tied with Jonathan Grenard of the Houston Texans. Sweat did this with 2 different teams, though, which is interesting. He had 12.5 sacks, as did Grenard. Aiden Hutchinson, 11.5. is 12th overall if you're looking just at statistics. I won't be looking at just statistics, but let me jump over. I will for one thing. First, you got the Comeback Player of the Year award. Joe Flacco. Comeback Player of the Year. And I'm just like, what? I get it. The guy was sitting on the couch and then basically led the Cleveland Browns to 4 wins, 4-1 record, and probably how they got into their postseason berth. There's no denying that. But were his numbers really? I mean, comeback? You had DeMar Hamlin, who everybody thought was a shoo-in for this. You remember this guy? He died on the field a year ago. Now, DeMar wasn't putting in the same kind of snaps and work that he was previously. I kind of wonder if he'll still be on the Buffalo Bills roster when you look at this a year from now. It's already been 3 years in the league. That's usually where you start to consider, well, if we can improve here, rookie contract, mainly special teams guy right now. Maybe a feel-good type thing. Bad PR, obviously, if you cut the guy. But Joe Flacco. Where do I start with Joe Flacco? Where do I start with the Cleveland Browns? Joe Flacco, 1,600 plus yards passing. Just a inch, 60.2%. Just a tinch over that 60% completion percentage that you strive for. Didn't have it in those first 2 games. He had 4 games with over 300 yards passing. Multiple touchdowns in every single game. But he also had multiple turnovers in 2 of those games. Browns are lucky that they even won this one. Chicago Bears. Flacco throws 3 picks, gets sacked 4 times. The Bears had like what looked like an insurmountable lead. Yeah, sometimes the ball's got to bounce your way, right? 13 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. Of course, this is all done before the conclusion of the season. So the 2 pick sixes and the terrible playoff game at Houston doesn't account for Comeback Player of the Year award. But I really thought DeMar Hamlin coming back from, the afterlife and being able to play a full season of professional football might have been the feel-good story. They were painting his number on the field and everything. I thought it was a shoo-in. It seemed like the politics for the NFL, this was going to be the Comeback Player of the Year. Wish Mason Rudolph could have got a little more play, but he wouldn't have gotten the love that the NFL is giving. They're just showering the Cleveland Browns with love. They want so bad for the Browns to be relevant again that they gave 2 more awards out. One more than deservedly so. I will not deny that Jim Schwartz should be the AP Assistant Coach of the Year. I can't think of somebody else that I would put in the same category right now. You're not going to give it to somebody like, let's say, Todd Monken, for example, with the Baltimore Ravens. I would probably have looked at Brian Callahan, the offensive coordinator for the Bengals, for what he did with Jake Browning, maybe, and he landed a head coaching job, or maybe Ben Johnson over there with the Detroit Lions offensive coordinator and what they were able to do this season. But I'm totally cool with Jim Schwartz, another guy that's kind of been discarded, tossed around the league. This defense loaded with guys that are making a lot of money, former first-round picks, should be good, right? Myles Garrett, a top number 1 overall pick in his draft class. Should be good. He made them great. They won a lot of these games because of defense. Kudos to Jim Schwartz. I wasn't sure. I really wasn't. He's been around. He's had stinkers. He could very well suck next year. But this year, Jim Schwartz, he was good. Joe Flacco, Comeback Player of the Year, not so sure about. Kevin Stefanski, AP Coach of the Year. Cleveland Browns, head coach. Why? I'm struggling with this one. Okay, 11-6. I mean, Stefanski's been here for a minute. This is his 4th year with the Cleveland Browns. It's the 2nd time he's got them to the playoffs and to 11 wins. He's also led an 8-9 and a 7-10 season, and they finished in the basement the year before, but they still had 7 wins. I mean, this would be like giving Zach Taylor Coach of the Year next year if the Bengals win 11 games. They didn't even win, like the Browns didn't even win their division. Got a little bit of an issue with that. I understand. Yeah, okay, they had 4 quarterbacks. Steelers played with 3. Just shrugging. I know. The people on, if you're watching, you can see me just shrugging. Long pauses sometimes because I get long-winded on myself here. But I don't understand the hype. Like, no, I don't. They had the 5th most passing attempts for a team that should be a running team. They were only like, they had the 4th most attempts too. Yeah, a lot of that because they got the football back because of defense. They were 12th in yards rushing. They were 19th in passing. I mean, defensively, they were number 1 in yards, 13 in points, 5th in takeaways. They're very stout defensively for the most part. Number 1 passing defense in the National Football League by yards this year. That's all in Jim Schwartz. The Kevin Stefanski led, and he got rid of Alex Van Pelt, his offensive coordinator. Scapegoat for this because they weren't very good in various ways. I understand. Okay, lose your quarterback. Starting running back. Okay, Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb's special talent. I think Nick Chubb probably breaks down anyways. You can't have these workhorse backs that they're like, that's all they do. Steelers finally figured that out, adding Jalen Warren over to Najee Harris. So I think Nick Chubb probably gets hurt at some point regardless. That's why they always had a stable of guys. They're lucky that Kareem Hunt was just sitting there collecting dust because they didn't bring him back until after the Chubb injury. Jerome Ford, decent running back as well. They had like the offensive lineman. I know they deal with some injuries. But DeMeco Ryans, you look at like the Houston Texans. Now, the Houston Texans are a case example of where people are like, oh, look, they got CJ Stroud and they changed coaches and stuff. Okay. Let's hold your horses for a second. They did win their division, 10-7, 10 wins, just over the line. But DeMeco Ryans, first-year head coach, first time ever. I mean, Stefanski's been around for a minute already. He's been around the league for a minute, too. This Houston Texans team, some people will say, well, they got CJ Stroud. Steelers got to get a CJ Stroud. Yeah. Houston Texans stunk. Got Deshaun Watson. Didn't stink as bad. Deshaun Watson F's up. Then they're able to trade him for oodles of picks. They just gut the rest of the team of any type of players with nominal salaries, and you've got a load of rookie contracts. It's going to be a tough team, and they still have another first-round pick from the Cleveland Browns this upcoming year. And DeMeco Ryans, though, let's talk about the mediocrity that this has been. They're 4-12. They've had Bill O'Brien back when they were in 2020. They had Bill O'Brien for the longest time, and they were like, they were there. 9 wins, 10 wins. They had one bad season at one point with Watson, and Watson gets in trouble. They were able to offload him, luckily. And Bill O'Brien gets fired because he's also the GM, and he wasn't very good at that. If you remember, gave up DeAndre Hopkins for a bag of peanuts, some other guys. David Culley, Lovie Smith, 3 different coaches in 3 years. This team was a 4-win team, a 4-win team, a 3-win team, and now a 10-7 team. Made the playoffs and won a playoff game over the guy who won the Coach of the Year award with a rookie quarterback. My head is just like, I can tell you all the star-studded players that are on the Browns. I just did. Didn't mention like Amari Cooper, Joel Bitonio. You can add them to the list. Somebody name me the star-studded players of the Houston Texans besides CJ Stroud. Go ahead. I'll give you 10 seconds. Start thinking out loud. Who's on this roster? I mean, I could name Nico Collins, Tank Dell. Anybody know who these guys were? Bunch of no names, right? So I think D'Amico Ryans, and it was a close. It was a close call here. This was closer than the TJ Watt voting with Myles Garrett. Stefanski had 21 first place votes, 165 total votes, tied with D'Amico Ryans, but one more first place vote got Stefanski the award. Who are the dum-dums that are out there voting this over Dan Campbell of the Detroit Lions? Are the Browns and Stefanski really that much better of much more of a feel-good story or success or anything like that? Detroit Lions hadn't made the playoffs since 2016. At one point, this franchise was also an 0-16 franchise that had been going through the paces. Dan Campbell, I know, has been there a few years as well. If I'm going to but he's had to turn this around, just like D'Amico Ryans is turning this around. They made the trade with Matt Stafford. It's not as high profile or as much, but they've been able to do a lot with that, getting Jared Goff, getting some extra draft picks, right? Very similar to Houston. But this is a team that hadn't won double-digit games since 2014. It only been in the playoffs in 2014 and 2016 since 2018. 6 wins, 3 wins, 5 wins, 3 wins, 9 wins. Missed the postseason, 9-8. Second in their division, and then went to 12-5. And Dan Campbell only gets 33 votes and only 3 first place and 3 second place. I don't know who these people are that are sports writers. Are they all up with the Cleveland Plain Dealer? Is that how this works? This is insanity. I'm sorry. I thought Stefanski did a fine job. And some of the other folks, Mike Tomlin did get some votes, by the way. He got a second place, and he also got a third place. So it's weighted, first place votes, you get more points. Tomlin's way down there on the list, though, behind Kyle Shanahan, John Harbaugh, Sean McVay. I don't know. I don't really get this. Sean McVay, the Rams, I guess they didn't have as bad a season as people thought. Mike Tomlin, then Shane Steichen, Matt LaFleur, Todd Bowles, Mike McDaniel, Sean McDermott, with several of those guys getting just a handful of points, too, all single digits after McVay. Yeah, Dan Campbell belongs a little higher up there. I'm sorry. And yes, I am biased. See the name on the hat, see the logo here. If you look around, I'm a Steelers fan, but I'm sorry. Jim Schwartz, yes. Kevin Stefanski, no way in hell. Kevin Stefanski needs to just give this trophy over to Jim Schwartz as well. It's his. It's ridiculous. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, finally. Let's talk about TJ Watt and being snubbed for the NFL Defensive Player of the Year. This was one that I was very upset with. And we kind of all braced ourselves and knew this was coming because there's advanced metrics out there, made up, phony, hocus pocus, bullshit. Sorry, told you I was going to cuss at some point. From Pro Football Focus for almost getting to the quarterback. And guess what? Their grading system doesn't match up with other similar competitors who do the same type of advanced analytics. They can really kiss my posterior on this one. So you've got Myles Garrett getting 165 votes to TJ Watt's 140. 23 first place votes to TJ Watt's 19. And 13 second place votes to TJ's 11. Now Micah Parsons got a boatload. He got more second place votes than Garrett or Watt in this thing. He ends up with only 89 because he had 7 first place votes. 4 more people thought that Garrett was better and 2 more in second place than TJ Watt. It's the most preposterous line of crap. Everything else I've talked about to this point, a guy dying on the field, not being comeback player of the year, it's about the only one that might not pale in comparison as far as awards go compared to TJ Watt being snubbed. I talked about already Trey Hendrickson's numbers, Max Crosby's numbers. They're not even in this conversation. Micah Parsons was. We've seen the memes that have floated around, right? So let's bring this up. You got all the different. Watt had more tackles. People are going to say they don't play the same position. Fair. Okay. Maybe Garrett isn't in position to make as many tackles. But if you ever see the Steelers, they don't really play a 3-4. They're just playing with smaller defensive ends that are stunted out wide on a wider base and standing up instead of their hand in a dirt. That's the main difference. Very little as far as the physical attributes of these guys. They're going to say Myles Garrett. Somebody misspelled Garrett on this too, didn't they? That would figure when you're trying to make a point. That'll put a damper on it already. There's 2 T's in Garrett. But TJ has more tackles, more solo tackles. Obviously had more sacks, 5 more sacks. Micah Parsons is in this too as well, if you're not able to view this graphic over on our YouTube channel. 50 pressures compared to 37. I am taking some of this for, this is coming off of a meme or graphic, but you've seen this floating around. This actually isn't BS. This one is pretty spot on. I didn't vet the numbers. I could pull them all up. I've got them in front of me. I've got plenty of other numbers for Myles Garrett, Mr. 1 sack in the last 6 games of the regular season. Yeah, that's right. What do you do in the postseason? Anyways, those are our numbers there. I'm pull it up a little bit bigger if I can. This is just mainly Myles Garrett, like I said, showing as like 8th on this list. There's so many guys that have more tackles than even Danielle Hunter, TJ Watt. Yeah, so it's pretty accurate here. 36 quarterback hits according to Pro Football Reference. Josh Allen, 33 quarterback hits, so he had more. Micah Parsons had more. Justin Madubuike, not really talked about. That guy's a dude with the Baltimore Ravens. They found somebody there. And everybody's going to say, well, it's just, you've got all stats and stuff, but TJ has the forced fumbles. I didn't even get into all that. Where's the rest of these at? Hold on a second. Where'd that meme go? There we go. This comparison chart. Yeah, see the quarterback hits a little bit. Tackles for loss. We went through those. 4 forced fumbles. Fumble recoveries. TJ has interception. Okay, he's playing on the outside. But he got that by sliding inside, basically playing as an inside linebacker. More pass deflections. How do you freaking play on the defensive line? Get your freaking hands up, Myles Garrett. I am sorry. No, I'm not. I'm not going to apologize for these takes. Oh, dear goodness. Look, I'm pulling up Myles Garrett. They have like his nickname. I love the nicknames. They put him on Pro Football Reference. Superman or Bigfoot. He's none of the above. TJ Watt is the defensive player of the year. This is absolute, this is insanity. And of course, TJ went out and TJ Watt ended up making a comment basically spoiling the NFL Honor Awards about an hour before. He was on Instagram with his wife and showed that he was not attending. And there's the first comment. Oh, Jim Ricalto, formerly from Steel City Underground as well. Listening to a made-up metric when you dominated every real production category has to be highly irritating. I'd say irritating isn't the word I would use for this. But TJ Watt says, nothing I'm not used to at 8:12 when the show goes on at 9, and then they're going to announce the stuff. Good for you, TJ. Screw them. This is absolutely ridiculous. There's not enough being talked about with this. I've got an article that's going to be coming out next week because I'm fed up. I'm fed up to the point where people still carry water for Myles Garrett here, even though you put the numbers. You're going to talk about like, oh, Myles Garrett makes everybody better on his team. Hey, get the hell out of here. Who else? Let me talk about the Cleveland Browns and their defense. Where were they this year? We talked about pass defense. Grant Delpit ended up being a good safety. He's finally kind of panned out after not getting having injuries and setbacks in his career and finally getting to play. Denzel Ward, we know he's paid like a top corner. Greg Newsome, top first round draft pick. But Will Sunda's defense that was over the line. Is there anybody else that had double-digit sacks? It's Darius Smith. He's the counterpart here on the other end. 5.5 sacks. Get the quarterback maybe 20 times. You're going to say, that might be big. But the rest is like Delvin Tomlinson. There's nobody on here, really. Alex Wright's the next one with 5 sacks. Oronquo, 4.5. I'm sorry. Like, where's the elevation? Where's the elevation in play here? We know if TJ's not on the field, what happens with the Steelers, right? They're like 1-11. Alex Highsmith had 7 sacks. And it goes to Marcus Golden with 4. Nick Herbig had 3 as well. The outside linebackers killed it for the Steelers this year. That's a TJ Watt factor. I know Cam Hayward only had 2 sacks this year. He only played 11 games. Father Time might be finally catching up with him. But Myles Garrett for Defensive Player of the Year. I think there could have been some others that were in this conversation. But people carrying water, even in Pittsburgh, Mark Caboli of The Athletic. Let's not act like Myles Garrett did deserve the award, too. I prefer Watt. But I do watch him every day and see what he does, what he deals with, how he makes teammates better, but surely Garrett does that too. You have to look at tangibles, stats, 111 when he's out. I'm not really sure what Mark's trying to say here. Maybe he's defending this, says Garrett doesn't deserve, does not act like he didn't deserve it. I'm going to say maybe if there's a universe where TJ Watt isn't also playing high-level football, maybe Mark. But you also had some clown out here. Gail Lawley does some work with the Steelers Nation Radio, and one of the voters, the AP Awards, voted for Dexter Lawrence. 54 tackles, 4.5 sacks this season. 3 of those came in 2 games against Washington. Now, people are dragging Lawley because Dexter Lawrence is a 2-time All-Pro nose tackle of the New York Giants, in case you had to look that up. He's also a former first-round pick. So he's a guy that came in the league with some pedigree. And he's not Aaron Donald, generational elite talent. Myles Garrett's close to that, but I think he's underneath like the Aaron Donalds. It's like Cam Hayward is like not Aaron Donald, right? That's where I put Myles Garrett too. You got TJ Watt, then Myles Garrett, you have Aaron Donald, you have Cam Hayward. I know the people are going to think I'm crazy. Not this year's Cam Hayward, obviously injured. He said he had tore the groin right off the bone. That was a quote post game right after Buffalo playoff game loss. That's insane if he played with that kind of injury. But somebody voted for Dexter Lawrence. It just, who gets to vote for these things? Obviously, people that are just going to pay attention to Pro Football Focus and made up pass rush win rate stuff. But that's not the only thing I want to talk about. The thing that people don't talk about with Myles Garrett, I had this pinned to my profile, Joe_Kuzma. Myles Garrett disappears in the second half and late portions of the season. I didn't do this over 8 games. I'm going to, but I did it like fairly over the course of just the last 4 games of any season that TJ Watt and Myles Garrett both played, right? Because Garrett got suspended after honking Mason Rudolph over the head with a helmet. So the season ended a little early there. But those numbers actually, all boats rise with the tide. That's what happened because he had better numbers. Otherwise, these numbers are going to be worse, and they're very telling. But the number one thing to point out is, before that, I didn't even count the postseason game. Myles Garrett did not have a sack in 5 of his last 6 games of the regular season. Browns were 4-2 in those games. Does he make everyone better in those games necessarily? Is that what we're trying to argue? His sack came in a 37-20 win over the New York Jets. The New York Jets, who were playing Trevor Siemian at quarterback. Trevor Siemian, who was like the 4th guy to take get a start for the Jets last year. They had Tim Boyle out there. They had Zach Wilson. After Aaron Rodgers went down, they were trying just about anything. It was his 2nd start, really his 3rd game of action. And he got sacked twice. Trevor Siemian. Garrett got to him. That's 1 sack in 6 games. And now, if you count the playoff game against Houston, a goose egg. That's 7 games in the season. 1 sack when your team is already up 27-7, and the other team is forced into an obvious passing situation. Because they got to come back. They're down 3 scores. Who wouldn't know that you just got to go after the quarterback? Hello, ding dong. I shouldn't laugh. I'm going to make myself cough some more. The perfect picture of TJ just kind of like whapping on his own head. I mean, let's get into this real quick. I don't want to be too much more long-winded. I was going to talk about like the games where I was going to really get into like, Myles Garrett had 3.5 sacks in a game, right? Those were against the Tennessee Titans. And the Tennessee Titans were playing Ryan Tannehill at that point, who was 13-25 for 104 yards. He got sacked 5 times. It was such a bad game. It was pretty crazy. They just said the Titans couldn't do squat do against that team. He had 2 sacks also in a win over the Steelers. I mean, we all know that was with Kenny Pickett. Got sacked 3 times that game. Very similar, 15-28, 106 yards. Just awful game. The only game the Steelers lost in their division. So, got a couple of sacks, get some maybe mobile quarterbacks. Didn't get any sacks against the Steelers. Any other contest in September. Did not get any sacks against the 49ers, Broncos, Rams, Jaguars, Bears, Texans. First time around without CJ Stroud. Did not play against the Bengals in the finale. And then with CJ Stroud, didn't get to anybody either. Okay. In fairness, who did TJ get to? All right. TJ had 3 sacks against the 49ers. They're playing in the Super Bowl. First game of the season. 2 against the Raiders, Jimmy G. 2 against the Ravens. 2 against the Bengals. 2 against the Colts, Ravens. Which games did TJ not have a sack in? Just 4. Also Houston, surprisingly. Also the Rams. Okay, so we got 2 commons there. Patriots and the Seahawks. Okay. They at least had a half sack in some of the other ones. So when we 1 sack in 7 games, I just can't get past the fact that Myles Garrett had 1 sack in the last 7 games this season, including the playoffs, and it was against Trevor Siemian and the New York Jets. And they were already up 3 scores when it happened. But that equates to what? 22 first place, 23 first place votes. Go find this pinned to my Joe_Kuzma Twitter. I'm begging for follows right now. Last 4 games played in each season since being drafted in 2017. That would be 28 total games to compare TJ Watt and Myles Garrett. Let's freaking go. You already saw this if you're watching. 25.5 sacks for TJ Watt, 25.5 to 12.5. Almost over double the amount. Garrett has 16 of 28 games without a sack. TJ has half of that. Only 8 of 28 without a sack in that period. Just to put a little more icing on the cake with this too, like I said, these 28 games do not include inactivity due to injuries, suspensions, sitting out, as Garrett did against the Bengals at the end of the year. Those do not count. These are games last 4 played in each season. 28 games apiece. About as fair comparison as I can make. Because TJ sat in one of these too, right? Garrett had 1,523 snaps to TJ's 1,464. So he played more plays as a defensive end that is not going into coverage. 59 more snaps. 59 more snaps is almost a full freaking game. A full game's worth of repetitions for Myles Garrett to have half as many sacks because he disappears at the end of the year. The quarterback hit category, it's more lopsided. TJ Watt has 54 to Myles Garrett's 38. TJ has 5 games without getting to the quarterback at all. If we're going to use advanced almost metrics, Garrett has 8 of those 28 where he had not touched or sniffed the quarterback. 54 is a bigger number, folks. Forced fumble stats are a no contest. Watt has 10 of those. Garrett has the 1. I'm hoping, actually, I'm going to look back at that and make sure I've got that one right. That could have been, did I look at fumble recoveries? Oh, yeah, that's over the last 4 games. I'm sorry. So that is correct because Garrett had 4 in the entire season, but over the last 4 games, nope. Sorry. And these are, let me ask something. Do NFL teams give out large contracts for almost getting to the quarterback? If a guy leads the league in sacks and is a free agent, let's see. Justin Madubuike, I believe, is going to be an unrestricted free agent for the Baltimore Ravens, the same way Matt Judon was several years ago. We could use Judon as a prime example, double-digit sack guy. Gets paid by the New England Patriots. Did the Patriots pay him because he almost gets to the quarterback? He doesn't punch the ball loose. He isn't a game wrecker to force turnovers. He doesn't bat down passes at the line of the scrimmage. Executives in the NFL, general managers, are not, they might look at some analytics, but they're not handing a guy a fat bag like this. Now, that's not to say that Myles Garrett shouldn't be one of the highest paid players in the NFL. I'm still saying Myles Garrett is a very good football player. Please do not mistake that. This is in the context of who had the best season in 2023 and who has been the best player overall since entering the league at the same time. And TJ Watt has forced 10 fumbles to one single. Last 4 games of each season. These games count. It's December football. Somebody's got to make the postseason. The other teams are not just laying down and playing dead. Everybody is contending. They're competing. They're playing within their own division even, where it is just dog eat dog between the Bengals, the Ravens, Browns, and Steelers, and this guy has 1 forced fumble. 1. Yeah. Not to be outdone in any category, Watt also leads in tackles for loss, 28-22, pass deflections, 12-3, fumble recoveries, he's got 2 of those to 0, and Myles also has no interceptions, to which TJ has 1. I don't expect either one of those guys to be picking off passes, but here you go. That's what you have. 59 more snaps in 28 games played, last 4 of any season, and TJ Watt is a overwhelming, unanimous game wrecker compared to Myles Garrett. You could change the name on the back of the jersey and nobody would know who this dude is when the games really matter. And he wins NFL Defensive Player of the Year. Let's see. What do we got, Garrett, for your last 4 games of the year this year? Myles Garrett has 9 solo tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 7 quarterback hits, and a single sack, because we already referenced that with Trevor Siemian. How many more times am I going to say it? So I'm blue in the face. Actually, let me see. Make sure I got that right. TJ's stuff is backwards. I don't know why they sort this way. So TJ's stats over those 4 games. Let's see. Quarterback hit category. TJ leads that with 9. They're tied for the same amount of tackles for loss. TJ has more solo tackles. He forced a fumble. Myles Garrett didn't do that over those last 4 games. And what do you think might be the most important stat? Everybody's like, oh, well, you're just looking at stats. Sacks weren't even a statistic until 1982. Why did they become a statistic in 1982? Because they freaking matter. They count. Taking down the quarterback for negative yards, strip sacks. These are things that change games. Field position. His biggest turnovers. TJ Watt has 5 sacks in those last 4 games of the 2023 season. And he didn't even finish the game against the Baltimore Ravens. Leads the league in sacks. Leads the league. There was another stat that he was leading in. Passes defense or something like that. I'm trying to think. It was Michael Birch, who's one of these stats guys that covers the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to find that because I have to find that. That is now my responsibility to make sure I find this statistic before I let all yinz off the hook here. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Leave a rating or review wherever you may be. I've got to find... Got this one statistic. Oh, well, there's always good company, too. Julius Peppers just announced as a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, only player in league history with at least 100 sacks, 10 interceptions, 17 seasons. And TJ Watt is Michael Birch. According to this, TJ Watt's already like, he's almost there. 96.5 sacks and 7 interceptions. He almost has 100. He gets 10. He only has 7 seasons, 10 fewer played. Then Julius Peppers. Julius Peppers is all-time great. Not going to take it away from him. Oh. He got rid of it. Actually, he was retweeting Daniel Valente, stats guy Daniel. If Myles Garrett wins the Defensive Player of the Year over Watt, it'd be the first time since 2011 an edge rusher leads the NFL in sacks and loses the award to another edge rusher who recorded 5 fewer sacks than he did. So Jared Allen and Terrell Suggs was the other one in 2011. Not just the sacks, it's the game-changing plays. But Watt's the first player in NFL history to record over 19 sacks and 8 passes defense in the same season and not win the Defensive Player of the Year award. Absolutely ridiculous. I know that people will say what they say. TJ Watt wins the Deacon Jones Award for a third time. He's the first player in NFL history to do that. I like this comment. This is actually a very good point when you're talking about different positions. Dustin D-Web. I got caught in my own thing here. That's my thing with Garrett. If you want a 4-3 edge, it's him. But the fact that his win rate is so high, it doesn't translate to stats, just means he's easy to eliminate schematically. Advanced metrics ignore that or just hypothetical thinking. Yeah. Exactly. There's some other metrics there as far as passing and everything else, but I don't need to belabor everybody. You're going to have your favorite. You're going to have your bias. Obviously, I'm a TJ Watt guy. I believe he was robbed yet again, and it's just because his brother JJ has won the award several times. TJ's good. I think that the league messed up here. A healthy TJ Watt, a guy that's now going to recover from whatever undisclosed injury that kept him out of the Buffalo game for the most part. We don't know how serious that is or if he's had anything else done to rehab. But he is going to come back with a vengeance. You would think that this speaks volumes right here, right? That leave no doubt. And yet somehow he still didn't get the award. What do you think he's going to do next year? He's coming for Strahan's in his own tied record. He's coming for it. I'm going to feel very sorry for opposing quarterbacks. And let's not forget, too, that the Steelers finishing third in this division, they did make the playoffs. But they'll have a third-place schedule as opposed to Ravens having a first-place schedule, the Browns having a second-place schedule in terms of those other games to fill in on there. Folks, my name's Joe Kuzma. Thank you for tuning in to the Steel City Underground podcast. Till next time, we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good. Enjoy the Super Bowl. We'll catch you on the flip side next week.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.